St. Anthony Audio presents St. Agnes from the Golden Legend, Lives of the Saints. Agnes is the same as Agna, which means lamb, for she was gentle and humble like a little lamb. Or it may come from agnon, which is Greek and means pious, for she was pious and compassionate. Or it comes from agnoscere, which means to know, for she knew the way of truth. But Augustine opposes truth to three vices, namely, vanity, lying, and doubt. And she overcame these three by means of great virtues, which were hers. Agnes, a maiden of great wisdom, was 13 years of age when she lost death and found life. She was young in years, but mature of mind and soul. She was fair of visage, but fairer of heart. The son of a prefect, seeing her on the way home from school, fell in love with her. He promised her diamonds and great riches if she would consent to be his wife. But Agnes answered him, "Begone, sting of sin, food of crime, poison of the soul, for I am already given to another lover." She began to vaunt her lover and betrothed, praising in him the 5 qualities which an espoused maiden esteems most highly in him whom she loves, namely, nobility, beauty, wealth, courage blended with strength, and lastly, love. And she said, "He whom I love is nobler than thou. The sun and the moon wonder at his beauty. His riches are inexhaustible. He is mighty enough to bring the dead to life, and his love surpasses all love. He has placed his ring upon my finger, has given me a necklace of precious stones, and has clothed me in a gown woven with gold. He has given a sign upon my face to keep me from loving any other than himself, and he has sprinkled my cheeks with his blood. Already I have been embraced by his pure arms. Already his body is with my body, and he has shown me an incomparable treasure, and has promised to give it to me if I persevere in his love." Hearing this, the young man sickened with his love, and was in danger of death. His father came to call upon the maiden in his son's behalf. But Agnes made answer that she could not break faith with her bridegroom. Then the prefect asked who this lover might be, and when someone told him that it was Christ whom she called her lover, he began at first to question her gently, and then threatened to punish her if she refused to answer. But Agnes said to him, "Do whatever pleases thee, I shall not give up my secret." Then said the prefect, "Make thy choice. If thou prizest thy virginity, offer sacrifice to Vesta with the virgins of the goddess. Otherwise, I shall lock thee up with the prostitutes." But Agnes replied, "I will not sacrifice to thy gods, and yet I shall not be defiled. For I have with me a guardian of my body, an angel of the Lord." Then the prefect had her stripped of her garments and led naked to a house of debauchery. But God made her hair to grow in such abundance that it covered her better than any garments. And when she entered the house of shame, she found an angel awaiting her, holding a tunic of dazzling whiteness. Then the place became for her a house of prayer, and the angel cast about her a supernatural light. Then the prefect's son came to the place with other youths, and invited his companions first to have their pleasure of the maiden. But when they entered the room where Agnes was, they were so terrified that they fled back to the prefect's son, and he, calling them cowards, rushed madly into the room. But the devil throttled him on the spot, because he had not honored God. Then the prefect, in tears, came to Agnes, and questioned her about the death of his son. And Agnes said, "He whose designs he sought to carry out has received power over him, and killed him." And the prefect said to her, "If thou dost not wish me to think that thou thyself hast killed him by some magic art, ask and obtain that he come back to life." And at Agnes's prayer, the young man returned to life, and began to confess Christ publicly. But then the priests of the gods stirred up the populace, and cried out, "Death to the witch, who changes men's souls, and bewitches their minds!" Meanwhile, the prefect, at the sight of the miracle, would gladly have released the maiden, but, fearing that he would be proscribed, he withdrew sadly, and left her under guard with a lieutenant. This man, whose name was Aspasia, had the young girl thrown into a raging fire, but the flames, dividing, consumed the pagans and left Agnes untouched. Then, by the order of Aspasia, a dagger was thrust into her throat, and in this manner her heavenly spouse claimed her for his bride, having decked her with the crown of martyrdom. All this is believed to have taken place under the reign of Constantine the Great, who reigned about the year 309. And the parents of St. Agnes, with the other Christians, buried her with great joy, and they barely escaped the shower of stones which the pagans hurled at them. Agnes had a foster sister, whose name was Emerenciana, a virgin full of sanctity, who was preparing to receive baptism. This young maiden stood before Agnes's tomb, and began to inveigh against the pagans who had slain her, until those killed her also, by stoning her. At once the earth trembled, and God's thunder fell upon the spot, taking the lives of many of these people, so that thereafter the faithful were allowed to draw near to the tomb without being molested, and the body of Emerenciana was buried beside that of Agnes. 8 days later, as Agnes's kin watched around the tomb, they saw a choir of virgins in robes made of gold, and among them was the blessed Agnes, with a lamb whiter than snow at her side. And she said to them, "Look upon me, in order that ye may not mourn me for dead, but may rejoice and be glad with me. For I have been admitted henceforth to sit in the midst of this company of light." By reason of this vision, the Church, 8 days after the feast of St. Agnes, celebrates the octave of the feast. The news of this vision came to Constantia, the daughter of Constantine, who was suffering from leprosy. Without delay, the young princess betook herself to the saint's tomb, and there she prayed to her and fell asleep. Then in a dream she saw Agnes saying to her, "Constantia, be constant, believe in Christ, and thou shalt be cured." Awakened by the voice, she arose and saw that she was cured. She received baptism, caused a basilica to be erected above the tomb of the saint, and there gathered around her a number of virgins who, like herself, passed their lives in chastity. A certain priest of the Church of St. Agnes, called Paulinus, began one day to be tormented by a dreadful temptation of the flesh, and, as he had no wish to offend God, he besought the sovereign pontiff to allow him to take a wife. But the Pope, who knew his goodness and his simplicity, sent him a ring set with an emerald, and told him to address the same request to a beautiful statue of St. Agnes which stood in his church. And when the priest asked St. Agnes to allow him to marry, the statue all at once held out its ring finger, slipped on the ring given by the Pope, and then withdrew the hand. And straightway the priest was freed of all his temptations. This is said to be the origin of the ring, which is still to be seen on the finger of the statue. But others say that the ring was given by the Pope to a priest whom he commissioned, at the same time, to watch over the Basilica of St. Agnes as he would over a bride. For lack of care, indeed, the venerable temple was falling into ruins, and the saint's statue is said to have placed the ring on its finger as a sign that she accepted these espousals. St. Ambrose writes of her in his Book of the Virgins, "Old men, youths, children, sing her praise. Who is more praiseworthy than the one whom all praise? All men are her heralds, since merely by speaking of her, they proclaim her glory as a martyr. Be astonished that she was God's witness, although at her age she could hardly have been her own master. God trusted her when men trusted her not. For that which was above nature came from him who created all nature. This was a new martyrdom. She who was too weak to suffer was strong enough to conquer. She who could not fight, yet won the crown. The mastery of her virtue accomplished what the prejudice of her years forbade. No bride hurried to her bridal chamber, as did the saint to her place of judgment, joyously with hurried pace." This same Ambrose says in his preface, "Saint Agnes disdained the glory of her noble birth, and in return secured heavenly nobility. She despised that which men sought, and in return shared in the eternal kingdom. She died a precious death in Christ's name, and so became like him. Every year, we honor the feast of St. Agnes on January 21st, and the feast of her foster sister, St. Emerentiana, on January 23rd. If you enjoyed the legend you just heard, please click the like button, and if you haven't already, subscribe, and be sure to turn on all notifications. That way, you'll never miss another great legend or great truth of our most holy Roman Catholic faith. Thanks again for listening, and God bless.